Ravens Watch.
Welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Ravens Watch. I am your host, David Lee Corbo, aka The Raven, and I am here with today's guest, Zack. Zack and I met on Reddit. I found one of his stories. I think it was in Our Experiences, one of the ones that I kind of hang around and sift through, or maybe it was in Paranormal. But Zack had a really interesting story about his experiences with UFOs and alien abduction. And if you listen to my last episode, I have a feeling you're going to hear some similar themes. As I discussed in my last episode, these things often have sort of hallmark attributes that you can find in common from one experiencer to the next experiencer. And a lot of these things, they sort of tie into the whole sleep paralysis phenomenon. And I'm not necessarily saying that they are related. It could be different entities, different beings that are possibly utilizing the same state of mind that your body goes in when you're in the dream realm. I'm not breaking ground here. I've heard from multiple people, more authoritative sources on this than myself, that when you enter the dream realm, you're kind of in this place where something else may be able to visit you. And I don't want to give too much away, but very much there were elements of Zack's story that, rhymed with a lot of my experiences. And I'm sure if you're an experiencer of sleep paralysis and things of that nature, there's going to be a lot of parallels with Zack's story. So without dragging you guys along too much more, Zack, how are you, brother?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Happy to be here. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. Zack, if you could, why don't we start from the beginning? Because the email you typed me was a great story. I kept reading it, but I wanted to hear a lot of it fresh, on the episode talking to you. But then again, I kept going back to it. And like I said, man, there was so many things that were, your story is just like so many other people's story. And, when you get all those aligning of the elements, something really compelling is happening there. So why don't you take me to, let's say, your earliest memory of these experiences?
Okay. So it first started out, I guess, when I was 6 years old. I started having these weird dreams. I guess you could call them like recurring nightmares or recurring dreams, whatever you want to call it, of this white house that was probably maybe a mile down the road. I've never been there. I've never seen who's lived there. I've never met the people. You know what I mean? I've never had any affiliation with the house, but it just kept appearing. And I remember in the dream, I would be led up a flight of stairs and into this room where there was it was just a white room, and then there was a bed right in the middle, and then there was a praying mantis like phasing through the back wall of the bed, like hanging down over. And then the next thing in the dream, I'm just like laying down still, can't move, and I'm looking up straight up at this like praying mantis thing just looking down at me, and that's all I remember. I kept having that dream for probably, I don't know, probably until I was about maybe 10, and then stopped happening, and that's when I really got into the more like scientific understanding of the world. Like I started losing my like faith in religions. I started wanting like science and answers. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. Like your typical teenager or little kids wanting answers and stuff. I carried that with me until I was about probably 3 years ago. I'm 28 now, and I had done a hypnoregression. And yeah, some guy Reddit actually.
Interest.
Yeah, some guy on Reddit was reaching out to just all these experiencers saying, hey, I'm offering pro bono sessions with 2 people who claim to have been abducted by aliens. I was like, shit, that kind of sounds like me, because after going down the rabbit holes when I turned about like 18, 19, when I started discovering like the paranormal stuff, ghosts, astral projection, demonology, Ouija boards, you know, the typical late night YouTube videos, right? I started getting interested in that, and then started getting interested in like UFOs, aliens, different dimensions, and stuff like that. And so fast forward to about 3 years ago, or actually, it was about 3 years ago, and then I did the hypnoaggression about, I think, maybe 2 years ago. And I talked to the dude, he ran me through it, and what I had discovered was that the dream wasn't actually a dream. It started when I was 6 years old. I remember I was sitting in my bed late at night, and I wake up to this just blinding light. This is bluish white. It filled my entire room. Having a little bit of knowledge of light, it was about 15,000 lumens per cubic inch of my room. Like, it just filled everything, no shadows. It was just blinding white light. And then next thing I know, these 2 just little beings just there. They appear right by my window. And I remember hearing and like feeling a voice inside my head say, "Come with us." And I just went. I didn't even think. I just went. You know what I mean? And then next thing I know, I'm just floating up through the air. I can see the night sky. I can see the town below me. And then I'm just in this like large, I guess, hangar type area. I guess I understand it now. Everything was made of like a white, like an eggshell white, curved, like smooth paneling, I guess. I remember seeing concaved metallic bluish steel beams that connected everything, like the like housing, I guess, the walls. And I remember being led towards these like silver balls that were kind of parked off to the, like, I guess, my left when I got there. And I think at that point I just got scared and I ran. And I remember seeing this large window, and I remember looking down, and I'm seeing, like, I just see like what looks like the earth. And I just see the blackness of space. I don't see any stars. I just see the glow of the planet below me, and I keep running. And then I remember getting stopped by what looked like a large human-looking person, but they had like I remember long hair. I think it was brown hair, but I remember their faces looked very angular, I guess, like very, very chiseled, very blocky, very, I guess they didn't really have smooth facial structure, I guess you could say. And they said, I remember they didn't speak it, but I could feel again that voice inside me saying, "Whoa, you're not supposed to be here." And then next thing I knew, as I'm being held, the 2 little grays come up and basically grab me. And I remember just like floating. I couldn't move at that point, either floating or being carried back to this other room where it was like a strange, like brown diffused kind of light inside. Everything just kind of, it had an off color. You know how you can change like a color temperature in a room and like it'll change the color of things?
Right.
It was kind of like that, but it made everything like a reddish, brownish, orange kind of hue. And I remember being led into the room and being laid down onto this bed, and then seeing this large insectoid looking thing next to these little, like a kind of station, I guess you could say, like beakers, tubes. It had like tools, like all kinds of, like a science lab basically. And I remember being laid down onto this bed. I still couldn't move. And then I could see the little grays just watching me, just standing there by my bed, or the bed, just staring at me, while this large insectoid thing comes around to the side of my, like behind me, grabs my head and turns it to the side, and it sticks like a needle or something into the side of my neck. And then I remember everything just going like fuzzy and like hazy. And then they picked me up, and the grays, they picked me up and they brought me to another room where they had a small black box, and inside the box, when they opened it, like the whole time they're staring at me. I could see at this point they didn't have the large black eyes anymore. Like they could see their actual like large like golden. They kind of look like frog eyes. I don't know if you've ever seen what a frog's eye looks like. It doesn't really have much like whites of our eyes. I don't know the terms for the shit inside the eyes.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean, where it's primarily pupil, and then there's the iris, and that
Yep.
takes up the vast majority of the eyeball. You're not seeing the whites of their eye.
Yeah, exactly. It was like a golden brownish, almost looked like a cracked texture to it. You know how like spider webbed glass looks like?
Yeah, yeah.
It's kind of like that. I don't know if it's like veins in their eyes or what, like the pigmentation of the eye itself, but that's kind of how it looked like. It was like a golden brown, but like it's like that cracked pattern. They're just staring at me the whole time. Just like I think they're just measuring my reactions to things, to different things. And as I open this box, it just explodes in light. And inside the light, I'm seeing all these different images and like memories of like landscapes, houses. I'm seeing like mathematical equations, shapes, numbers, symbols, like all kinds of shit. And then all of a sudden I'm like seeing what I now understand as my own past life. I experienced the death of my own family and then my subsequent suicide. And then,
Whoa.
right. And after that, they shut the box and then they lead me back down to this long hallway made of like that same concaved structural design. And it's very cold there. I don't know why it's like that, but it's just cold. I don't know, like kind of like walking through the refrigerated section at a Costco. It's just like cold. And they're walking me down the hallway and back into that hangar, and then I'm floating back down. And then the next thing I know, I'm being laid down back into my own bed, and they're turning around and saying, "We'll be seeing you again soon," and then they're just gone.
Wow. Okay. So before we go any further, there's a bunch of things I'd like to unpack there. And I've got a bunch of questions I'm very interested in, but I'm going to start in chronological order. What do you think the significance of the house was? So the way that you described it, it's a white house. It's by itself in a field.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like its own standalone house on a piece of land. Like, you know, we live basically in kind of the boondocks, if you will. Like, it's not very populated. The parts where I was living at the time, like there was a house maybe every 100 yards. Like it's fairly spaced out on that road. You know what I mean? Like it's just surrounded by hop fields.
Right.
So it's just like, yeah, it's its own little standalone house.
And do you think that the house was an actual physical location, considering it based off of what you said, you've seen it?
Oh yeah, I've drone past it multiple times. Like it's an actual house.
You know the house.
Yeah, I can show you a picture of it. Like it's an actual house. I lived that was like down the road, like a mile down the road from where I lived.
So, do you have any thoughts as to why that house?
I've talked to my wife about that, and we both can't come up with any answers except for like a screen memory or something that like maybe they know they can see different houses, different structural layouts, and maybe they just pick one that'll fit the aesthetic to make a cover memory. I don't know. That's just my best guess. I have no.
And as much as it doesn't seem like maybe the house is that important, could you describe it a little bit as far as like the look of it? Is an older house?
I mean, it's been there since I was a kid, and that's like over 20 years. So, I mean, it's a fairly old house. I don't think it's anything like 100 years old, but I mean, it's been there for a while.
Huh.
It's got 2 stories. It's got a large like front door, 2 windows on the side, and then like above the front window is like a half circle, large ornate window, and then the whole house is white.
in regards to the hanger, I'm sure that based off of what you said, you're sort of digging and coming to understand these things. There always seems to be this theme. Not only is it a very medical sort of sanitary place, almost like a clean room, right? Like you described with all the whites and everything, but there also is this common theme of almost a military feel, that there's a hangar is
Everything
the word
seemed
that
very organized and like very methodical. It had a very uniform layout. Like it was everyone was. I could see a bunch of like human looking people, like the tall, I guess what I now know with like Nordic types. Like I don't know if you've gone down that rabbit hole. They look like
Sure.
that basically. Like they were all wearing those like solid colors, like coveralls, very baggy, but almost also form fitting of like navy blue, light blue, dark brown, forest green. Just everyone, but like different people wearing different colors basically, and everyone was just doing something. They weren't just standing around. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that brings to mind this idea that I've come across, and I'm not too keen on the details, but it was this idea that uh, there are certain contracts with certain entities, ETs or otherwise, where they're allowed to operate for a set amount of time until the contract expires. And so that contract entails things like having the right to abduct us or run experiments on us, or examine our DNA or genealogy. And that there are, in fact, like you described, the Nords, as well as the Greys, as well as the Insectoids, right? So there's your praying mantis creatures, and that some are benign, some are nefarious, some are neutral, but they all have a vested interest in seemingly our DNA, certainly our children, which is deeply upsetting. But I'm sure that all rings a bell to you.
Oh yeah. From what I understand, it definitely has something to do with genetics. I'm a little familiar with those deals that you're talking about. But to their whole malevolence, benevolence, neutrality, like they don't, at least from my understanding, like the whole time when I was laying on the table, I remember asking them like stop hurting me. Like, why are you doing this? Stop hurting me. And they did. They took the pain away. But like I still couldn't move. Like they were holding me by my wrist. I don't know, like my wrists were like in a locked position kind of. But they weren't touching me. I don't know. But I remember just being locked and that was hurting. And I remember asking them like, stop hurting me. And then just the pain went away. So I don't think they're necessarily malevolent. It's just that they're indifferent to our emotions and feelings because they don't necessarily understand them. And they have their own set of morals, their own ethics, their own set of rules, I guess you could say. They will help you as long as it serves the greater collective.
Right. So in the sense of, or maybe not even necessarily the collective, but if you take it from the point of view of, excuse me, someone who has a job to do, whether that job is a medical or science or anything like that, or the job of the phrase that take you, each of these things seems to have a job. And that job becomes significantly more difficult if you're resisting. And when are you likely to resist? If you're feeling pain or discomfort or fear. And so they mitigate that somehow by alleviating it however they can. Maybe not necessarily because they're positive entities, but because your discomfort is getting in the way of them executing their job.
Yeah, that's a good observation.
That's really interesting. Do you have well, I'm hesitant. I'm not too sure. I've got a couple of more questions here, and I don't know which one I want to hear first. Well, let's go with this. What the hell was the box about? What do you think the box was about? The box that contained this light and this information and mathematical visions and visions of the past?
I don't know. I don't know. That's what I saw. I don't have any logical explanation. I don't know why they did it. I don't know.
Well, we're certainly, when it comes to these topics and on this show, The Ravens Watch, I'm not really too worried about logical explanations. But I imagine if I was in your seat, I would certainly have a hierarchy of ideas as to what purpose this
I,
served. What do you think if you had to give your wildest guess?
well, I guess I'm on the side of science explaining spirituality. So if they have a box that contains information alongside memories of what appeared to be my past life, it means they have access to information outside of linear time. And so I think it serves a purpose to, I guess, help us remember something to then change our current path. Because I'm noticing a lot of similarities in my life that I had seen in this vision that they showed me. And it has allowed me to kind of, not necessarily like better myself, but like understand like everything is a lesson.
Okay. Could you maybe go into a little bit about what you saw in regards to, um, well, really all the things in the box are interesting to me. The mathematical equations, whether or not they meant anything to you, or at least if you understood maybe what they pertain to, and then certainly the past life.
The past life stuff's pretty traumatic. Um,
I could imagine.
but the mathematical stuff, the symbols, I don't know. Like it's, I guess now since I've remembered all of this, I've been completely obsessed with research into directed energy. What is it? Uh, Gravitational propulsion, electromagnetics, like all of this other shit. And I don't know. I guess maybe they helped unlock something to where I could use that information and kind of do something with it. I don't know.
I've heard that before. That is one of those common threads where oftentimes these beings will show sciences and mathematics, and that these things often pertain to a higher level of human achievement when it comes to inventions and technology, things of that nature. And I wonder if you've ever heard this angle. To me, it does not sound unlike the stories of these ancient beings who have brought various technologies to early man.
Mhm.
And you hear throughout all of this sort of, mythology and folklore about, even the concept of like Pandora's box, or various weapons and technologies throughout the ages that man didn't create necessarily themselves, but there's always this backstory of some god bringing this to some early civilization, and also in the way of agriculture and things of that nature, pivotal moments that change the trajectory of a civilization,
Oh yeah,
always towards an advancement.
yeah. My favorite one is the ant people of the Hopi legends. During the cataclysms, these ant people came out and taught them how to live in pueblo houses and can grow corn and beans and live like in underground in the caves to survive the cataclysm. And I guess they've done that for like 3 of the past cataclysms for these ancient people. So I don't know.
Oh,
Maybe
see,
those
I
ant
got the
people
right
are
guess,
these
dude.
insectoids.
Um, so the reason I brought that up is because I'd like to hear your thoughts on, and this is probably not unfamiliar to you, the idea that these beings, in whatever shape they take, are the same beings from, the Bible and the story of the fallen,
Oh yeah,
and
I
that
tell
they were
people that
cast
all
out
the
of
time.
heaven. Yes, and I love that connection. It's unbelievably compelling. It's one of the sexier ideas out there, honestly. And
Oh
it
yeah.
connects all of these various civilizations through to one common thread. And then
Mm-hmm.
it begs a very important question that I don't expect you to have the answer to, and I don't know if we will, within this lifetime, but are these beings, if they are the fallen, despite how we perceive them, are they being deceptive? You see what I'm getting at?
I actually have an idea towards that, because that's one of my favorite rabbit holes. I believe that these human-looking beings, these Nordics, these tall people, are our creators. These are the angels that the people in the Bible talk about. When heaven opens up, they come from this non-local space, this extra-dimensional space. They come in, they come down to the prophets, share their knowledge, the whole Ezekiel's wheel and all that. And the whole Bible says, God said, let us create man in our image. So by technicality, God, by the Bible's definition, and the angels are non-human intelligence. And I believe that the whole story of creation, the whole Adam and Eve, when Eve was created from man, like Adam's rib, that's just genetic manipulation to create a second body for repopulation. I believe a lot of things can describe things that are in the Bible that can be perceived as non-human intelligence, crafts, alien abductions, and hell, even Mary getting abducted and impregnated with Jesus. You know what I mean? Like,
right. I'm currently reading Eric von Daniken's Enoch and the Return of the Gods, I think it is, or something of that nature. And he presents a lot of those ideas that all of our interpretations of the Bible in these ancient books, well, we're just hitting the stopper of language and translation. Right. And that a lot of these things were just out of the realm of our ancestors' ability to translate or to put into words that we were going to understand. And so, and it's very compelling the way that he puts this together. And a lot of it is very much what you just said, this idea of making Eve out of the rib of man. Well, that is shorthand, or could be interpreted as shorthand for genetic manipulation. And also these beings that we see throughout history in Egyptian mythology and Sumerian mythology, where they're these hybrid human animals, you know, our Anubises, Osirises, things of that nature, that they are the results of genetic manipulation as well. And so, yeah, I can see that you are, and for good reason, seeing this through the lens of, like you said, a much more scientific approach to spirituality than just this sort of faith-based spirituality.
I think it's all,
so.
And I think once people
could you tell me a little bit about? I'm sorry.
Sorry, no. I was going to say I think it's all connected, and I think once people start realizing that, we're going to start getting some answers.
Yeah, and that could be. I mean, we're kind of in this limbo right now, right? We're on the cusp of the what's the popular word, disclosure. It seems like our government is sort of inching ever closer. We're getting little breadcrumbs here and there via NASA and the Pentagon and the White House. I believe it wasn't long ago that they released an article, and I think it was from the Pentagon, that they have recovered crashed vehicles not made by man. And that's all the article said, but it's very potent. I mean, you know, a lot of people, it's weird because, as I said, we're in the midst of disclosure, and it seems to be going over a lot of people's heads. They almost seem disinterested. We're more interested in, you know, Adam 22 and whether or not he's letting his wife get banged by other porn stars or some crap like that, rather than looking up for a second and realizing, like, oh shit, the government's about to tell us that aliens are real. And it's weird because I've been into this for many years, and I always dreamed, especially when I was younger, 16, 17, 18, that, wow, the day they finally pull the curtain back, it's going to be so profound and people are going to drop everything they're doing. No, dude, people are balls deep in OnlyFans, and they can't look up for more than a second to realize that we're in the middle of something really big. And so I wonder if our government's going to be honest, what that disclosure is going to look like. Are we going to be exposed to this idea that there are other beings, or are we going to be exposed to this idea that these beings are potentially responsible for us in a huge way? Those are two fundamentally different things, right? One is there's people in space and they're not like us, but you know, it's pretty cool, dude. They got tech. And the other one's like, oh shit, they made us.
Right. That's some ontological shock right there.
Yeah, but I do wonder if it would even be impactful, or if people would just keep going about their daily lives, watching Black Mirror and jerking off.
Well, I can attest to that because my mother-in-law is one of those people who are extremely religious, and now hearing all of this, she is very, very scared. Like she's having that shock, and I feel like there could be millions of people around the world that have this same kind of shock, and I feel like it might do what COVID kind of did. It might bring the world to a little like standstill for a little bit. But I think people are going to still be worried about paying the bills, and I think that's sad.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny to think that if we're on the cusp of this, Mass Effect future where suddenly we're just part of the galactic family, and 100 years from now we look back at this moment in time as the moment where we were, we had it revealed to us that there was in fact a galactic society of different beings, and that that was the beginning of us being welcomed into the fold. But I have to admit, I'm trepidatious because what I don't want to happen is to just be blown away, so blown away that I can't think straight. And I think that's a dangerous thing, right? Is like, I don't care what happens. I'm a conspiracy theorist at heart. I've been since I was 15, 16 years old. And it could be staring me right in the face, and I will not take it at face value. And I want people to, especially, fans of the show, and just don't be so amazed that you don't slow down and think. Don't buy everything hook, line, and sinker, because if these things have steered the progress of humanity, then there is a very important question at the core of that needs to be asked, and it is, to what end? Because if you're looking at the whole Zecharia Sitchin aspect of it, where it's the Anunnaki, then that starts to suggest that we were a slave race that was genetically altered from, early hominids in order to, I think it was mine gold. I think that was Zecharia Sitchin. Now I know that he's a prolific science fiction writer, but I think the story was their atmosphere on their home planet was diminishing, and that they needed gold to suspend in their atmosphere to protect their planet, and that we were meant to mine that gold, which is alarming. I don't know if that means they're going to be so thrilled to see us, or if they're going to crack the whip and put us back to work. There's so many different ways that this can go, and there's so many different interpretations, and I just want people to, I think it's real, but then that doesn't mean that there aren't a dozen or hundreds of follow-up questions, like where you mentioned it earlier, those who came from heaven, and you said something to the effect of a heavenly realm, not necessarily something in the upper atmosphere, but something in a different dimension.
Right.
And so what does that mean for the entire space narrative? Because I do see that there is an effort being made by Hollywood and the government to sell us this idea that they're just off-planet beings. But then when it comes to people's firsthand experiences, I get a lot of, it's interdimensional. And so, I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Who's to say they don't come from another planet in another dimension?
Right. But then that kind of puts us, a skewer in this idea that, that Hollywood gives us, which is just, they're from the planet Xenu, and they're going to, visit us with their intergalactic technology. And sure, they come through wormholes, but we're talking Einstein-Rosenberg bridge wormholes. They're just folding time and space. They're not coming from an area outside of time and space.
So I remember reading something along the lines of the Air Force would, back in like the 50s, 60s, 70s, all the way up to the Hollywood craze, would reach out to certain directors to push a certain narrative of extraterrestrials to help reinforce the disinformation program. I don't know how necessarily true or false that is, but I have seen quite a few things that like to fearmonger. And I feel like that could play into the whole military industrial complex agenda,
Right.
scaring
What's
the
the,
people
is it
and
the,
giving them more money for
right.
weapons development and fighting these things instead of working together. And I think
What's
that's
the,
what the extraterrestrials are worried about.
what's the famous speech by, was it Nixon who said that he dreams of a threat from
I think that was
outside of
Reagan.
our planet?
I think that was
Was it
Reagan.
Reagan?
Yeah, I think that
Yeah,
was
and
Reagan.
that it would unify human beings under a common
Mm-hmm.
threat, and that we would put our differences aside.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm paraphrasing, but fund the
Yeah.
military-industrial complex with every penny that we have in order to fight this extraterrestrial threat. You
Mm-hmm.
know, so there's, I mean, look, our government is problem, reaction, solution, and oftentimes I don't think it's debatable that they will cause a problem, wait for our reaction, and then offer up the solution. And there are different magnitudes to that little formula there. And alien invasion is the highest magnitude. I mean, what person in their right mind wouldn't bend over backwards to empty their wallet and life savings out and throw it into the government's face in order to do something about this threat from outer space?
Right.
Well, I want to ask you about this. This, can you tell me about the regression hypnosis session? Was it a session or well, I'll let you describe that. You said that you talked to somebody who was offering a free.
Yeah. So he was offering pro bono sessions, and I reached out to him, gave him my story, and much like I did for you, I told him my little experience, and he's like, he showed interest, and then we got together, and it was actually done through Zoom, out of all things. And he basically played an audio file while walking me through. It was almost like a guided meditation, almost. And he just did what he would normally do, like with an in-person session, but over Zoom. And he just walked me through my subconscious, brought out the memories, and here we are.
And how did you feel about it while it was that suddenly being faced with memories? That's a strange concept, right? For somebody
I
who's not initiated.
I have the audio file recording of the hypnoregression session, and at certain traumatic points, I remember hyperventilating and shaking. Like it was pretty wild to experience all of that.
So you go through, you know, most of your life into adulthood, only having this faint memory of a dream that involves a house, and then all at once.
Never made sense. Like the whole dream, it just never made sense.
Dreams are a weird one because there are certain dreams that are like, what's the expression you use? An earworm. So a song that won't get out of your head, right? They
Mm-hmm.
call it an earworm. It's like for whatever reason this thing is stuck there. You have to listen to the song oftentimes in order to get it to go away. And
Yep.
for a lot of people, myself included, there are these almost core memory dreams that you don't forget. And what age were you when you had those dreams?
Well, it happened when I was 6, so the dreams probably have started happening probably like 7, 8, 9, and 10 around there.
And how insane is it that a dream can follow you your entire life and you never forget it? And there's this, uh, and I'm going out on a limb here, assuming that this is the case, and this has been the case for me and other people that I know. Uh, this feeling of importance. It feels important, although
Yeah,
its descriptive is insignificant on the surface, right? It's like,
yeah.
I don't know, there's a house in a field and I've been to it, dude. I don't know what to tell you, but I can tell you that I
Mm-hmm.
won't forget that dream for some reason.
Exactly.
That kind of actually, and I'm sure there's other people uh, sharing this sentiment with me, makes you feel a little bit uneasy. Like I've got a lot of dreams that I remember for no reason. Some of them make sense and others not so much. But does that mean that uh, there might be something? Because it often feels like that. Like there's something more to it.
Right.
And so you had this nagging feeling, I'm sure, throughout your life. You don't know what to do with it. It's a pretty insignificant dream. You can tell somebody about it, and they'll shake their head and go, "Wow, man, that's crazy." But for some reason, to you, it's just embedded in your psyche.
Yep, exactly. You're taking the words out of my mouth. Okay, there's just no reason why I should have that memory, but yet something deep inside me tells me I don't want to forget it.
So when you go through this regressive hypnosis, and well, how long is the session?
Um, it took about like 15, 20 minutes to kind of get me into that deep like that relaxative state kind of. And then it took probably maybe an hour, hour and a half.
And when you come out of this, well, number one, what's his reaction?
Um, I mean, he was very professional. I mean, he just took notes, asked questions, kind of like asked how are you feeling, stuff like that, and then we just kind of briefly talked about it. The whole seeing my family die and seeing myself like kill myself, it was very, very traumatic. He kind of just helped me process that kind of.
So part of the regressive hypnosis was experiencing this past life experience.
Yeah, the black box that they showed me, that flash of light and all those memories and visions and stuff.
What what if anything do you remember about your function in this past life or the details of your family?
Everything's very, very fuzzy. It's like, you ever see in those movies where they have like um flashbacks and the outline is very like white, hazy, foggy, and like in the middle you see just like bits and clips of different memories flashing by and stuff like that. That's kind of how that was. I remember it first started out with me just looking down at myself. I could see, I guess I was a very like stout kind of person. I had, it like looked like I worked a hard job kind of attire, like, you know what I mean? I had like large work boots on. I was walking up to a house on a small piece of land. And I remember just like the whole landscape just felt empty, felt lonely. And I walked up onto the steps, onto like a front porch, walked through the house, and I remember seeing a living room off to the side, and then the wall that goes into like a kitchen or something. On this wall was just like tons of pictures of the family and like this large, almost like ornate cabinet kind of thing, that had like memorabilia, pictures of the family. And I just remember looking at the wall and just feeling very, very sad. And then I remember taking a gun and ending my life, basically. And I remember just the
Do
whole
you
flood of emotions and like feelings while staring at that wall brought back the memories as to why I was feeling that. And that's where the memories came in with losing my family in a car accident.
and so you knew it was a car accident that took their lives.
Yeah.
And at this time you were 28 when you experienced this regressive hypnosis, or was it
No,
further back?
it was a couple of years ago.
Okay. And so the reason I bring that up is because I imagine, yeah, if it's a couple of years ago, did you even have kids in your actual
I
life
had
yet?
I had my son.
So you had to experience what it was like to be a man who lost his family,
While
and
having
through the
family.
context of essentially being a new father.
Yeah. Yeah, it was rough.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine that. Um, man, an hour and a half, and you're just kind of so you
And
said it took about 20 minutes.
how do you think I feel knowing, seeing the exact similarities in the family I had to the family I have now? A wife, a child, two children, one just a little bit older than the other, and like the damn near identical like similarities in living a life. I don't know if
Incredibly,
we're supposed to repeat our life lessons until we figured everything out in each life, because I guess ever since then, I've become a very hardcore believer in reincarnation. I believe all energy, like consciousness energy, is just a fundamental force of the universe, and our physical manifestation is just a receiver, a translator of that energy and experience, basically. And we just keep coming back until this fundamental force experiences all it can experience. I believe that's
right.
what beings show you with this black box. I believe they are the facilitators of this plan.
I recently started going down the rabbit hole of numerology, and I came across one teacher in particular, and he and I actually had a falling out. But what I will give to him is that there's some uncanny synchronicities there when it comes to his theology, and it's not his theology, right? We're talking ancient Egyptian, ancient Babylonian belief systems, all the way up to Pythagoras, and this numerical system informs things to this day, like the Freemasons. And so there's definitely a lot of weight there. But one of the things that he was saying was that there's this almost this isn't his wording. This is the way that I interpreted it. But there's almost like a ranking system from 1 to 9, and then 11, 22, and 33. And that these numbers, they are the sum total of the day you were born, the month you were born, the year you were born, things of that nature. And you add them all up and you get these numbers. And they'll tell you something to the effect of almost where you are in the whole reincarnation thing. But one of the things that he said that kind of resonates a little bit with what you just mentioned was this idea that you have to get it right in order to, I guess, have a more favorable reincarnation or to get out of this karmic system that we're entrapped in. And that gets into some really unsettling stuff, like something that I have trouble with is this. I think the beings associated with it are called the archons. And it's this idea that when you pass away, this bright white light that people explain or, describe in near-death experiences is, I don't want to use the expression nothing more because that sounds reductive, but it's the rebirth. It's, almost can be likened to you emerging out of the womb into another hospital full of bright white lights and things like that, and that we're stuck for whatever reason in this reincarnation loop, and that the energy that we're creating when we go through these things, some people refer to it as loosh, this idea that all of our pain and suffering, and I'm sure other energy, I don't know if these beings are into the positive at all, but that something is feeding off of the energy that we put out into the universe every time that we're reincarnated. And that, I find that to be one of the more deeply upsetting theories, because it removes the idea of eternity with your loved ones and rest, which I do think there's something, because like you said, I don't think that energy can be destroyed. It's just like matter, right? Matter can only change form. It's either a solid, a gas, or a liquid, and we're now discovering that plasma is on there as well. But why wouldn't energy adhere to a very similar set of rules in that you can't destroy it, it only changes forms. And if it only changes forms, then in some sense, some part of you is eternal, and therefore some part of your loved ones is eternal.
Yeah. Have you ever gone down the rabbit hole of the Monroe Institute?
I'm sorry?
Have you ever gone down the rabbit hole of the Monroe Institute?
I'm familiar with the expression, the Monroe Institute, but I couldn't place it. Would you mind?
So, like, the gateway process, gateway tapes, all of that. So I can send you the files. The CIA did a report back in the 70s, 80s when Dr. Robert A. Monroe, he has a book, Journeys Out of the Body. He does all this research about out-of-body experiences, astral projection, all of that stuff. Like,
what was his name?
Robert A. Monroe. Here. Let's see. I have this book right here.
Robert A. Monroe, Journeys Out of the Body. Okay, that sounds
very
interesting.
Good book. I recommend everyone read it. 100%.
Okay.
So what he did, I'm no expert in the Monroe Institute, so don't quote me on all of this. But basically, what the CIA did is they did a report on his findings through the Monroe Institute, and they found that the consciousness rejoins what they call the absolute, and our consciousness energy retains information to offload into this absolute. Like they go down into like all the math and like how it talks about flipping out of reality when the brainwave oscillation patterns match a vibrational frequency of was it 10 to the negative 33 centimeters per second when read on an oscilloscope. So when the brainwave reaches that point of absolute rest before oscillating back down, it clicks out and like clicks out of the physical resistance and when or existence. And when your brainwaves continuously do that, your consciousness reaches the physical reality and joins this extra dimensional space, this absolute, the collective consciousness, all of that. And what they found is that we do indeed retain our information, our experiences when our energy leaves, basically.
Yeah, it's funny because without knowing the finer details of what you just described, one could come to that conclusion, right? If you take into consideration what we just talked about, matter can't be destroyed, so why would energy? And then you look at this realm as almost an experience ground.
Yeah.
That I've heard people say that, and I don't know if this is true, but I could see it, that we are the universe subjectively experiencing itself. And so I'm not too sure what the purpose of that would be, but this idea that we have these experiences and they're encoded into, let's just say, our soul, and our soul is pure energy, right? I'm really spitballing here, but we would bring that back somewhere when we leave this realm, right? So all matter returns to its source. It returns to the universe in whatever form that it is, and so maybe does your soul, your energy, and it brings with it your life experiences, and then that becomes there's a lot of issues with that. Does that suggest that, and probably so, after this there is no individuality, that we return to some sort of collective, we no longer experience reality as an individual, which is difficult for a lot of people, myself included. I'm a big fan of me. I'd hate to see me go. So and I kind of think, man, that's one of the more disturbing ones. And I think it's disturbing because, one, like we said, it rids you of the individual potentially, and two, because it follows a very logical path that makes sense to me. But it brings up a lot of questions. For example, where do these various gods and overarching God, and even the concept of Jesus? So I'm not a Christian myself. However, I've had experiences with, for those of you who have listened to the last episode, I ended it with talking about basically an encounter with a fucking greasy demon that tormented myself for 4 nights. And eventually my wife saw it, and then my son saw it. And once my son saw it, I became pretty desperate to make it stop. And so I did the only thing that I could think to do, which was prayed to Jesus Christ. And like I said, never was religious, was not raised religious, have never read the Bible or anything like that. But I was really grasping at straws, man. Like, I was desperate to get this to stop. I could kind of internalize it if it was happening to myself. And then when my wife experienced it, I didn't even tell her that I knew what she was talking about. I just went like, "Oh shit, that's crazy," because you don't want to freak them out. It's you're not going to have a good time if your wife can't go to sleep. And then, once it moves on to my son, I was like, "Oh shit, I've got to do something." So when I did that, it stopped the entire experience. Now, I'm a pretty loyal dude. If you stick your neck out for me, I'll never forget that. And so I have a hard time compartmentalizing that experience and dismissing, the idea of Jesus Christ in any way. And being immersed in the paranormal as I am, that story is not unique. There are thousands of stories, whether it's aliens, demons, ghosts, whatever it is. You can even Bigfoot, as strange as that sounds, Bigfoot and cryptids, you can make them go away by invoking the name of Jesus Christ. So how in the hell does that key into all of this? The more I look at this, the more infinitely strange this realm becomes.
Yeah.
So what do you think about, like we talked about it before, this idea that these beings have been here throughout history. They've given us technology. They've been responsible for the advancement of mankind in various different ways. Maybe they're the Fallen. Maybe they're the Nephilim. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're the Anunnaki. What is their function in this realm?
My best theory is I'm right there with you. I think they've been watching us for thousands of years. I think they've introduced knowledge at different points of our history to further our advancement, to see what we do with it, basically testing humanity as a cultural collective to see what we do with it. And I think they have intervened at certain points of history when certain civilizations, such as the Maya, Incas, and all that, were starting to do human sacrifices. They didn't like that, and so they intervened. Whether that's convincing someone away, having a religious experience to go venture off somewhere and spread their fucking diseases and warmongering and all that, just letting basically, I guess, influencing humans to do something that they want, basically, but not directly intervening. And I think that explains a lot of what we've been seeing throughout history, all these different reports like the Nuremberg sighting or the or hell, Roswell probably just planning a crash and giving them technology to see what they do with it.
Yeah. And it's funny because we see the Roswell incident through the media, essentially, right? The way that it's been portrayed in Hollywood, the way that the news portrayed it at the time, the way that it's been neatly tucked under the belt of conspiracy theory.
Mm-hmm.
But if we were to take a biblical look at it, or ancient Sumerian look at it, or what have you, this story would be told, beings from the heavens providing man with inexplicable technology to further our advancement. It would be another one of those stories. And
right.
So that starts to get into this really weird thing too, where it's like, okay, we die in our souls. They are encoded with our experiences. They go back to this sort of, central energy. But yet there is still a story unfolding on Earth. And this story is they really want us to have technology. They are really concerned with the advancement of human beings. And that, to me, that doesn't sound like the Anunnaki, right? If the Anunnaki just want us to mine gold, well, then they're not really too concerned. They would chuck a pickaxe at us and tell us to get in the hole and dig. Why then is there an entire group of entities that are very concerned with us leveling up? What is the end goal of that?
So I have some thoughts on the whole Zachariah decision. I've gone down that rabbit hole before. I'm not a fan of it. I believe that he has mistranslated a lot of the Sumerian texts, and he's like a conspiracy theorist like the rest of us. And so he created this whole spiel about Anunnaki mining gold for us, even though, at least from what I've seen, I've not seen any evidence of that. However, I do think that some of these stories of gods coming down, interacting with us, have been seen through different cultural eyes and understandings based off their levels of scientific understanding. And I think that's where all of these mixtures of stories, gods helping out, doing all this stuff come from. And I don't know, I think they want us to have technology for sure. I agree with you on that, but I think they're testing us to see what we do with it. I think they want us to have technology to help Earth, to help humans, but instead we're using it for weapons. And I think they understand that and don't like it. And I think the US government knows that they don't like it and are preparing for their intervention.
Yeah, I've heard that angle a lot. And honestly, that's human nature, right? We're given a thing, and then instead of free energy for all, it's how do we make the most effective weapon out of this, right? But then there is this whole other narrative that, based off of our interactions here, I'm sure that you've heard this. It's this idea that I'm going back to the fallen. They've been casted out of heaven. They're waiting for this day of reckoning, essentially. They rebelled against some some being, right? The Most High, let's call it, because
Yeah.
God is convoluted and I don't think definitive enough. So they rebel against the Most High, and the Most High has plans. He's going to let this thing play out, and then there's going to come a day of reckoning where everybody's going to sort of have to answer for their shit. But their intention was to overthrow and rule heaven. And so the idea, this is not my idea. I'm not this clever, but the idea was that they are amassing a sort of army, and they're going to do it through a great deception, and that we won't be worth a shit unless we merge with technology. And if we can merge with technology, a couple of things happen. One, their influence over us is much greater. For whatever reason. I don't know. Some people say, oh, it's because we have the God spark in us. And as long as the God spark is there, then, they really don't have any bearing over us, and that we have authority over them. So if they can change something about us through technology, that might give them the edge. Also, this idea that they can only manifest in this realm in certain ways, and that through technology we may be able to, and you see this pattern over and over again. My son and I were just watching a new one of the fucking 82 new Ninja Turtle animated movies, which was awesome, by the way. I didn't think I was gonna like it because I'm an old school Ninja Turtles guy, but I ended up loving it. But the idea is that there are these ancient ones, and these ancient ones exist in another realm, and through some sort of technology that resembles magic in a lot of ways. This is in the movie. Resembles magic in a lot of ways, but has this technological aspect. They are able to punch a hole through into this realm and then come here and fulfill some sort of prophecy. Which, like, man, is there no shortage of that story in entertainment? These ancient beings coming through a portal into this realm to fulfill some sort of prophecy. And so is that even I mean, to me, that's possible, right? That could be the angle, is that the name of the game is deception, and they're meant to push us until we can finally act as their means to enter this realm, and then in a much more physical sense. And then I guess from here, now this is shitty storytelling on my behalf, launch some sort of attack on a heavenly realm. What do you think about that?
I mean, that's definitely an angle I haven't heard before. I definitely think that it could be some kind of ancient stuff coming through from a different dimension, and I don't know, man. That's a wild one.
It is. It's also deeply upsetting because there are people who share their stories, and they have a lot of positive interactions with these things. Not only that, the experiences are deep and meaningful, and I don't think that you can boil them down to just being some nefarious, deceptive creatures. In fact, the only thing we have to go by is ourselves, right? And if you look at human beings, we are a range of things, and not even to say some of us are evil and some of us are good. All of us are evil and good. And so why wouldn't they be the same? You know what I mean? The only example we have is ourselves. And so maybe it is some of that, and also some positive things. And, it's probably an amalgamation of all things. But I can't help but, being a conspiracy theorist for a long time, I was always yelling into the sky, and people were always telling me that I was crazy. And now that all this stuff is coming to light, and it's much more palatable now, right? The idea of aliens, or the idea of some Luciferian cabal, used to be something that you would laugh at, and now it's kind of like, well, yeah, maybe that's there. Who knows to what extent, though? But most people will be willing to tell you, like, yeah, the government is infinitely corrupt. And now I'm still on the outside shouting into the sky at people who are seeing the deception and thinking they figured it out. And I'm going, no, I think this might be a juke. This might be a sidestep. I'm so worried, in other words, that the way that the government is handling disclosure, we know that within our own government, there are people practicing. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say there are people that are practicing dark arts. And for me, that is not a limb. And on this show, I don't think that that's a limb either. And if we entertain that idea, sure. Within the governments, there are, however large or small, a group of people who are influential, who are dabbling in the dark arts. And then you look at the fact that some aspect of our government is getting ready to, reveal it all to us. I'm hesitant to buy the narrative, man. I'll remain skeptical forever.
Mm-hmm. That's I don't. I'm with you on that, man. Like with their whole revelations coming out now, I am very worried of a false narrative being pushed. I'm trying to remain skeptical and open-minded at the same time, and I trust the facts. I trust what can be verified, because we've all seen the Air Force create shit with the whole Richard Doty thing. Like they have lied and they will continue to lie. That's why we as a collective, I believe, need to rise up and get the truth. And I think we're about to see something along those lines.
Yeah, I get the feeling too that we're in this moment in time where the curtain is, and I've said it a couple times through this show, but it's like the curtain is getting pulled back. And, like I said, as somebody who was on the sidelines screaming into the sky, as soon as I see the government start playing ball and saying, "Oh, look what we have here. We've got aliens here." I'm like, don't take that. Don't go near them, dude. That's not what you think it is. I don't know what it is, but those sons of bitches are lying, man. They've been lying, so I don't know. It's a hard time to be someone who is trying to be honest and trying to find the truth and trying to be objective. I entertain a lot of things because if there's one thing that I've learned through my journey toward the truth is that it's so much stranger. It's this place is so much stranger than we think it is. And I'm very certain that the people at the top know almost just how strange it is. And they have no interest in telling us for all these years. I mean, if you look at just occultism, right? NASA as an entire entity is shrouded in occultism. If I'm not mistaken, Jack Parsons, who is, for all intents and purposes, the father of modern day jet propulsion, was obsessed with Aleister Crowley and trying to summon, with the help of L. Ron Hubbard, the Scientology guy, trying to summon something called the Moon Child in the deserts of New Mexico, I believe it was. And for the audience out there, you guys can fact check me. But what is a guy who he's a rocket scientist? What is he doing balls deep in the occult? Why is there this marrying of technology and occult all these years?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it was Werner von Braun was a part of the Nazi occult research division.
Absolutely, he was.
So you made a great observation. I don't know why that's connected. Didn't Tesla talk about going off, communicating with some, or at least that's a theory, he was getting his knowledge from some ethereal, like a Akashic realm or something? Like he was a part of, like, interested in the occult. Wasn't Leonardo da Vinci, I think, when he was 17, he disappeared for like a week or some shit and came back and, like, with all of this knowledge and started inventing things?
Yes. So that's what really gives me pause, is that at the highest levels, science and technology are intermarried with occultism. And if we're calling a spade, occultism and demonology are right there. So when these famous occultists are communicating with various entities, for example, Aleister Crowley was communicating with something. I forget what its name was. I think its name was Lamb. And if you look this, if you look this up, yep, what does he look like? What does Lam look like?
big old fucking gray alien, big dude with a big cranial head and everything.
So what the fuck is going on? You know what I mean? This marrying of tech and occultism and things that resemble ETs as we know them now. This is starting to paint a picture of this great deception that gives me pause. Is like, we have been shown ET in the context of, all of our big movies from the 60s and 70s and 80s. We're talking Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind and, all these movies that have set the tone for what Americans are going to accept aliens as. And never in those movies do they say Aleister Crowley interacted with something that looked like this, or Jack Parsons was trying to summon an entity in the middle of the desert, but he's also working for NASA. And like you said, Werner von Braun was one of the Nazi scientists who were scooped up during Operation Paperclip. After World War II, we had all of these Nazi scientists and occultists who were simply, according to, and I could see this angle, too valuable to allow the Russians to scoop up. And
Right.
so we scooped them up. And we're talking about the founding father of NASA, right? And NASA, I mean, I can't even get started on NASA. They lie constantly. In fact, there's someone.
Never a straight answer.
What's that?
Never a straight answer. That's what NASA stands for.
What does it stand for?
Never a straight answer.
Oh my God, yeah. Well, and then somebody else was just like, what happens if you drop a T in there? It's an anagram. Spin the letters around. What do you get? It ain't Santa. So I don't know. I don't know what all of that means, but I do know that it starts to paint a big picture. And it seems like all these things are connected. We're talking, demons and occult, technology and science, aliens and UFOs are all connected, but we are given them compartmentalized. We are given them as separate things. The aliens are their own thing. They're from a planet. The tech is the government and human beings just doing a damn good job. The occult is just crazy Aleister Crowley and other people of his ilk. And those things have nothing to do with one another. But when you look at them objectively, they are all intrinsically, they are a sort of unholy trinity with tons of overlap. And that's not what we're told, dude. And so I don't know. It goes back to what I said earlier. Don't be amazed with whatever comes down the pipe soon. Pump the brakes. Don't take anything at face value. And I'll leave this realm not believing in shit that somebody else is telling me. Even if I experience it myself, I don't know what it is necessarily that I'm experiencing, but I do know it's a lot weirder than they make it out to be.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Zach, I wanted to ask you, because we're an hour and 15. Is there anything else about your story that you'd like to touch on?
I mean, from start to finish, that's really about it. They took me from my room. They showed me around it a little bit in the hangar. I got scared. I took off. They captured me, took me to the room, did their tests, and then brought me home. I mean, that really just set off my whole life of just really never looking at things mundane, like the mundane things of Earth, the same again. Like nothing's the same. Do
you have any issues like that still, or have they kind of come to a halt?
All the time. I'm having an existential crisis with what's going on in the greater reality every day. That's why I'm just sucked into my research. I want answers. And this whole disclosure thing, I'm right there with you, man. Like they're don't get so caught up on what they give you, because I can see it everywhere. Everyone's just hyping everything up, and I feel like they could give us something and then we'll just take it at face value and say, oh my God, look at it here. It was like this all along. See, I told you. But then behind the scenes, there's really something else going on, more nefarious, that we'll probably never know about. And that's where I agree. Like, pump the brakes, look at it objectively, let go of your subjective experience for just a second, and just really, I don't know, just really see what they have.
I like to think that people like you and me are cut from a slightly different cloth because what I see in you is the same thing I see in myself. We can look at the absolute craziest aspects of this reality and still wake up in the morning and go to work and do what we have to do. Because a lot of people, there's this misconception, right? It's like conspiracy theorists, they're locked in their basement with their tinfoil hat and they're, on obscure messaging boards looking at things that have no bearing in reality and they can't even function otherwise. It's like, no, dude, I'm a welder and a father and a husband and I've got shit to do. But you think Netflix is entertaining? This shit is the most entertaining thing, the best story that's ever been told. You know what I mean? When people, I remember I was heavy into the QAnon thing when it first happened. I won't get into it. I've got my own thoughts on QAnon now, but people were going, how can you look at that? I'm like, I don't know, dude. You're watching Black Mirror and like, yeah, Black Mirror is well written, but this story is way better, man. Like within our own reality, there are stories more compelling than anything you're going to watch. In fact, the crap that you're watching is just mirroring the compelling stories of reality. They're just giving you a homogenized, sterilized version of shit that's really going down.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Well, listen, Zach, I really appreciate you giving me your time. This was a genuine pleasure. I'm glad to find out that you're as fluent, if not more fluent, than I am in this whole thing. And I do want to extend to you that if anything very interesting should happen to you, consider this an open door policy. You're always welcome back to the show. Should you ever get any new information,
I have tons of
or new events.
That's just my first abduction. I have other experiences that my wife and I have had encounters with like a tall white looking alien thing, and then like we've done our CE5 stuff when that was a craze. I have UFO photos. Like I have some crazy shit. I'd be happy to
some
share.
of those, sir.
For sure, yeah, I can send them to you.
So then let's consider this part 1, and I would love to have you back for a part 2 in the future.
Sure, absolutely. I'd love to be here.
All right, Zach. When the episode drops, I'll send it your way. And until we speak again, thank you so much for being a guest on the Ravens Watch.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
Have a good night, brother.
You too.